probably been 9 months, but we started this before. I'm going to pick up and about where we left off. James chapter 1. We're going to start with verse 9. First is a slight recap, and this will tie in later. So it's traditionally thought that the book of James is written by James, the brother of Jesus, who's also the James that was seemed to be one of the lead elders, at least, of the church in Jerusalem. All right, so starting in verse 9. Let the lowly brother boast in his exaltation, and the rich in his humiliation, because like a flower of the grass he will pass away. For the sun rises with its scorching heat and withers the grass. Its flower falls and its beauty perishes. So also will a rich man fade away in the midst of his pursuits. This comes right after asking God for wisdom and being not a double-minded man. And so, to me, it seems a little funny that it's like, let the lowly boast, and then, let them both boast in what happens to them. And kind of what I'm and to me anyway, and then the point is what God provides for us, we shouldn't downplay, whether that's because that reminds me of Job. Is like Job, God gives and he takes away, God be praised. Like no matter what, God be praised. So if God lifts me up, I shouldn't be ashamed of that. But also if I'm up here and something happens and I go down here, I still shouldn't be ashamed of that, because this is what God has provided and where God has put me. Job chapter 2. Verse 10. It says, "But he said to her, 'You speak as one of the foolish women would speak. Shall we receive from God, and shall we not receive evil?' In all this, Job did not sin with his lips." I think, especially, to me, the book of James is about making sure that what's in your heart is also what's your actions, like the two together. So being a person, and to me, this being a person of integrity is like you act in accordance with how you believe. So if you believe that God will provide for you, and if you ask that for wisdom, you have to understand like where God puts you is where he puts you. And you shouldn't be ashamed of that spot. Yeah. Let the lowly brother boast in his exaltation. Okay. I think so, because poor and rich does come in later too. Yeah, so that's also the other side of it. Yeah, the spiritual is because the poor person can still be, they don't have to be ashamed that they don't have money because they're rich if they have God. Exactly. Because, yeah. And I can tell you I've known quite a few people who they saved up quite the nest egg and it was gone before they even got to touch it. And later, I'm pretty sure it's later in James, it talks about why do you try to be rich? Or why do you try to be friends with the rich when they're the ones who basically steal from you? Like, a lot of, you can see through the Bible and also just around, like, yes, some people come up with something and they make a lot of money. Other people are rich because they don't treat other people well. And so why do you want to be like that? If you say God is who I want, if I want to follow God, why would you be upset that that doesn't take you, that you're not someone else who cheats everybody? But that is, yeah, it would be absolutely, it would be the spiritual there. And then also that would go for the rich. Just because you're rich, like now you're equal with this poor person, whereas before you would consider yourself better, but you're equal as Christians, and you should still be rejoicing in that. Because honestly, nobody's lost anything. Everyone has gained. All right, and then verse 12 through 15. Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. One of the things that I had not realized for a lot of years, so in verse 12 where it says trial, is the same Greek word as tempted. And so even back in verse 2, when you fall into various trials, those are all the same Greek word. So you either read them all as these are all temptations or these are all trials. Which I don't think one or the other is, I don't think either way is wrong. But it does make it seem very different. Like, count it all joy when you fall into different temptations. I know for myself, the fact that I continue to be tempted by things feels like a weakness and a failure. And what this says is that that's the wrong way of looking at it. It's not that it's a failure, but that God is still working on you. And it goes back to the verse about being disciplined. Like, if you're being disciplined, that means that you are a child of God. Like, he only disciplines his son. So when you go into those hard times, don't be upset that things are happening, but recognize that this is God being with you, not God abandoning you. Yeah. Right. And then the other thing I think about this is, so, it says, let no man say when he is tempted, I'm being tempted by God. It's like, no. Let's see if I can say this. It's been a very long week. 2 days out of town is and the time change. I hate the time change. My sister told me, or texted me yesterday, and she said she made it through time change week, the week before spring break. She can do anything. I just have to deal with myself, and that's hard enough for me. But this is count it joy when you're in a trial, because there's work being done. Like if you like anything, ask God, and He'll do it. Just you have to do it in faith. Like rejoice basically in your situation, and then blessed are you when you stay steady under those trials. But you don't go and say, "Well, God put me here." Like God made this trial for me. Right. Yeah. Right, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I just when I started thinking about this as being that tempted and the trial and the temptation were the same word, that it was the same meaning, just really kind of opened up. Like when you're going through a hard time, like yes, God, like when you lose somebody you love, that's a hard time. But you don't say, well, God took them away so to put me through this. But God uses where you are for you. And then, and I think it does go back to like, well, in Hebrews, like to be pleasing to God, you must believe that He exists and that He rewards people who diligently seek after Him. Like He doesn't want you to, He wants you to know that He is a loving, caring God, not that He's putting you through terrible things because He wants to see us suffer or He likes to see what happens. But He does let us get into bad situations, whether it's our own making or someone else's. Because the truth is, sometimes it's not our fault. Sometimes it's other people's bad choices. But then, what do you do with that? And how you see them, like, because it does get really hard. As you see, it's something Christians have struggled with a long time, is like, how do you go through bad things? Why do bad things happen? And sometimes it's, well, why did God do this? Or why did God let this? And the truth is, He lets us make choices, so He lets bad things happen, because we don't get a choice. But He can also use any situation for our good. And I just was, especially when you go back up to verse 19, it talks about anger. Like, sometimes I get angry at the situation I end up in. Whether it's work-related or just when things happen, get mad at other people for their choices. And you come back to, well, the reason it's a bad part, it goes back, like, it's a bad situation because of people's own desires. It's not because God just decides to do something. It says, like, each person is tempted or tried when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. There's a lot of situations, honestly, especially when other people cause them, we could get out of if we're willing to give up some things. Whether that's relationships or jobs or money. And not saying that's the right choice, but there's usually more ways out than we're willing to say. But also, the other side of that is that God can use us in those situations for those other people too. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Honestly, there's been not too recent times, or not too distant times, where I felt like God hasn't been blessing me as much as I wanted. And so I was trying to basically sort of manipulate him into blessing me. Like, well, maybe if I give more of what I have. Not that that's... Giving more is not a bad thing, but doing it expressly to try and get God to bless me more was a... Yeah. Yeah. But, when everything else doesn't... And again, well, I mean, I'll be honest, like, we've had a lot of debt over the years, and sometimes the paycheck just barely covered everything, and you're like, well, things aren't working. I can't make more money this way, but I also couldn't, well, I mean, I could have, but go get another job, but then I wouldn't see my wife or kids, and also my job generally has a really regular schedule, but not always, which makes it really hard to do something else that has a schedule, and I'm like, well, maybe if I'd been better at giving, and things didn't get worse. And I get frustrated with myself because God has always taken care of us. Whenever we had a true need, things have shown up through different avenues that I never would have expected. But I mean, it gets hard when things aren't the way you want them to be. I think that really is what it gets down to, is like, I wanted them to be a certain way. I wanted certain things. And that's what made it so hard. Darcy, were you going to say something?
We already sort of moved away from it.
All right.
I was going to say that rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. Hopefully I'm not the only one who struggles with rejoicing with those who rejoice. To put it simply, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. No, it is. No, honestly, it's true. And it is hard. And it's also hard when good things happen to you and you know they're not happening for other people, to share it, to let them rejoice with you. But yeah, it is both sides of that, for me anyway. When things aren't going well for me, it is hard to be excited or very happy with somebody else when things, but also, just this last week, they're changing some things at work financially, so they're going to do end-of-year bonuses in March, but they're kind of transitioning over like a year and a half. Well, they closed out the books this month, and I got a bonus in December with most of everybody else in the company. I had a call on Friday from the executive director of my region to let me know that I'd gotten another one because things had gotten well. But this one I was told not to tell anybody at work because this was not across the board. And I was super excited, but I'm like, I don't even know who I can tell. And then thankfully I've got a friend who, as my friend Abraham, he's, his parent, he bought a house with his parents. Turns out they don't have the money to actually make their half of the payment. He's got 2 jobs now. I'm I feel bad, but on the other hand, one, I know that he will be happy for me, and 2, I think it will, I hoped anyway, that it would encourage him to continue to have faith that God would bless him. Because it was completely, I'm there was no way I could see this coming. But yeah. All right, and so let's go on to, and then we'll say, in verse 14 it says, each person is tempted tried when you're lured and enticed by his own desire. And then if we give into that desire, so then when desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. So if you tie this back to verse 2 and 12, so in verse 2, 3, and 4, it tells you that going through temptation will produce patience or steadfastness that will, and if you let it have its full effect, you'll be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. At verse 12, if you remain steadfast under trial, you get the crown of life that God has promised. And then you go to 15, and you're but if you don't, it's not just, oh, I didn't do it. It's, if you give into it, it'll kill you. This is, if you let it grow. Because again, Christians struggle, and that's, to me, a lot of James is, it's not enough to just believe, but put that into action. So if you say, well, I believe that God is this, I believe that whatever, but then I give in to my desires and let the sin come forth, it's going to kill me. It doesn't matter what I say I believe. What I do, if I give in to it, will kill me. And all right, verse 16. Do not be deceived, my beloved brothers. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. Of his own will he brought us forth by the word of truth, that we should be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. So I think it's interesting, out of this, now it comes to say, do not be deceived. And being deceived or deceiving shows up again in verse 22, about being doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. So, to me this means that, okay, this is an important thing to understand and that people are going to twist it. Don't be deceived by other people or by even your own experience, I think. And I just realized, the other side of that is, when we go through trials, through bad things because of our choices or other people's choices, the benefit from that is not through those choices. It's And every perfect gift is from God. Like, God can take a bad situation and use that to lead us to a better place, or to bring us to a better place. But the bad situation does not cause us, and should not get the gratitude for where we grow to. And so why is it important that there is no variation or shadow from change of God in this situation? Yeah. Yeah. And I think, especially in this context, he's also like reinforcing like God doesn't change. Like he's not moody like we tend to be. He's not going to, even if you look at the story of Noah, like he repents that he's made man, and then he gives Noah like 100 years to prepare before he destroys them. Like, this is not blow hot, blow cold. Oh, I don't like him this week, I'm going to hurt him this week. All right, I'll bless him this week. Like, God's not going to smash you down on one hand and then just turn around and pick you up. Not because he will allow things to push you down and then he will pick you up. But he doesn't do it because he changes or because he doesn't like us. I think is kind of the idea that he's trying to get across here. And then also, like, it says, of his own will, he brought us forth by the word of truth. It's like, this is his choice. Like, he's doing this for us. He's made this choice, which was a very costly choice for him. I mean, it required the sacrifice of Jesus. And we're told that it was not an easy choice or a painless action. But he wants us to be sort of it says that we should be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. Like this, the first fruits were always what were sacrificed and given to God. Like, they were sort of considered this, I think, the sweetest or the best. And that's what he wants from us. He wants us to be that. All right, and then really quickly I want to go into verses 19 through 21. Know this, my beloved brothers. Let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Therefore, put away all filthiness and rampant wickedness, and receive with meekness the implanted word which is able to save your souls. I was thinking about this morning and realized, of all the people, like, going through Acts with Stephen going through Acts, when Paul comes to Jerusalem, James is like, listen, like, the Jews are going to think that you're making big problems. So you need to go to the temple, and you need to, we've got these people, you go with them. And then he goes to the temple, and everyone gets really angry, really fast, and they start yelling and causing a big scene, which is not the first time that happened with Paul, but this is something that James would have seen. And it's just when Paul was, I can't remember which city, but there was suddenly an uproar because they said, oh, he's speaking bad about our God. And they're like, let's kill him. Even though most of the people didn't even know who he was or hadn't heard him say a single word. But even with our own, like even in our own like we have our own things that we get, you can call it a hot button or whatever, like our own personal things that when that gets threatened or different, we get really mad really fast. I won't say everybody. There may be some amazing people out there who don't have those specific things, but everyone I know has one thing at least that just sets them off. If you scratch my uncle's truck, he would fly out the door. And it's like, and even myself, like when that's happened, I'm not listening. I don't really care what the other person has to say. I don't really care that much at the moment what the right thing to do is. I want to be angry. I feel very justified being angry about it. And that whatever I do, no matter how ugly I am, that it earned that in the moment. And, and I think we can do that whether that's things people do to us, whether it's financial situations, no matter the situation, like you can't be quick to anger because, again, you're giving into your desire at that point, which he just told us leads to death. So, thank you. Sorry, I'm a little long.